All right, good morning. I assume it's still morning. I'm Yael Ziegler. It's wonderful to be here. I'm going to talk about a very familiar story. I like to talk about very familiar stories because it shows how we can use certain tools to get insights into stories that we're very familiar with. What we're going to try to do today is weave together midrashim, parshanim that we are familiar with, literary tools, interbiblical exegesis, right, using other psukim in Tanakh, and close attention to the literary reading of the parak itself to see if we can get some deeper insights into the story of Moshe. And Moshe, of course, is the most familiar Torah figure, right? He's very familiar. We meet him in Shemot Parak Bet, and we know him quite well throughout the duration of the Torah, and even after the Torah, right? In Nevi'im and Ketuvim, we keep referring back to Moshe. Moshe is really the central Torah figure. Why is he chosen? Right now, really, Hashem selects Moshe in Perek Gimel, right, at the Sneh, at the story of the burning bush. And so unlike Avraham, who we meet him, out of the blue at the age of 75, Lech lecha me'eretzcha me'aletcha me'beit avicha la'aretz asher eka, right? We have no idea why he's selected. And so many of the Midrashim come to answer that question, right? The Midrashim are coming to say, who is Avraham? What's been going on with him for the past 75 years that causes Hashem to select him? With Moshe, it's a very different story, right? Because before Hashem calls to Moshe at the burning bush, well, first of all, of course, Moshe turns aside to see the burning bush. That's definitely part of the story. But before that, we have a very long and well-developed parak about Moshe. And that's Shemot Parak Bet. And it happens to be that this is, I think, a beautifully composed parak from a literary point of view. And so I'm going to use it to try to demonstrate how using literary tools can help us to understand the parak a little bit better. The parak itself is divided into two. I think that's pretty clear. I did it for you here on the sheet. The first half of the parak is the story of Moshe the baby. Right? I think it raises a very important question, which is why do we need 10 psukim to tell us the story of Moshe the baby, right? We do have a lot of birth stories in Tanakh, but they're not necessarily this developed, and we'll talk about that in a few minutes. But the key word that appears in this first section of the chapter is the word hayeled, right? With the hey hayediyah, with the definite article. We're talking about the baby, right? We'll come back to that point in a minute. The second half of the parak, the key word, which appears 7 times, I bolded it for you, is ish, right? So, this all makes a lot of sense. The first part of the parak is about this passive child who is likely going to die. The second half of the parak is about Moshe, who has Vayigdal Moshe, right? Vayigdal Hayeled, we're told. He has grown up, he's defied all odds, and he's becoming an ish, right? So that's pretty much the breakup of the parak. I think the parak itself is a very well-known one. I don't have to tell the story, right? But this is the division of the parak, and what marks actually the end of the first part of the parak are the words Vayigdal Hayeled in pasuk Yud, and that's also how we open the second half of the parak where he gets a name, Vayigdal Moshe, right? Vayi bayamim ahem, Vayigdal Moshe. So what that tells me, first of all, is that the goal of the birth story is that Moshe should grow up. So that doesn't sound like a big chidush until you look at all the other birth stories in Tanakh. Right? We have lots of birth stories, and they follow a certain pattern. Right? By the way, not everybody gets a birth story. Everybody's born, but not everybody gets a birth story. Everybody dies. Not everybody gets a death story. Right? Lots of people get married. Not everybody gets a marriage story. Right? The question as to who gets a birth story is also a worthy question. I'm going to leave that aside for a moment and just say something about all the birth stories that we know, right? We know lots of birth stories. We have the birth of Yitzchak, we have the birth of Yaakov and Esav, we have the birth story of Shmuel, we have the birth story of Shimshon. There are lots of birth stories in Tanakh. All of the birth stories revolve around the same crisis. What's the crisis?
Getting born.
They can't have kids.
Akrut, barrenness, right? They can't have kids. The crisis is a crisis of fertility, right? And it's a question whether or not the mother will become pregnant, except for the Moshe birth story, right? See, that's not the crisis here. See, Egypt, unlike Eretz Yisrael, certainly in Sefer Bereshit, right? Hashem gives Avraham the bracha. The bracha is a bracha of fertility, right? Fertility of humans, fertility of land. Zera ha'adam, zera ha'adamah. That's the bracha that Hashem gives to Avram. And then you notice that in the duration of Sefer Bereshit, we have neither, right? There's no Zera Adam, and there's no Zera Adama. We have famine in the land, and we have a problem of barrenness in the land. Well, when they get to the great river societies, whether it's Haran, right, whether it's north, or whether it's Egypt, right, fertility of land translates also into fertility of humans. Right? So when they get to Mitzrayim, Uvnei Yisrael paru v'yishritzu v'yirbu v'yatzmu b'me'od me'od v'timalei ha'aretz otah. Right? This is a place of fertility. And, Moshe's mother has no trouble conceiving. That's not the problem. The problem in the great riverlands, the great lands of Zerah Ha'adam and Zerah Ha'adamah, a land of fertility of land and fertility of people, the problem, the crisis, is not whether or not there'll be people, it's whether people will be moral, right? Things come too easily in these lands. The question isn't whether or not Moshe's mother is going to become pregnant with him. The question is, will this child survive, right? The crisis of Moshe's birth revolves around the question not of whether he will be conceived, not of whether he will be born, but whether he will come of age. Because that's the crisis of Egyptian society. It's a crisis of morality. Okay? So that already, I think, sets apart this story from all of the other birth stories. It's a question of survival. Survival, of course, is linked to human morality, to human responsibility, to the question of whether or not this society will be able to maintain its people, right? It's enslaved another people. It has engaged in cruel and immoral decrees. And that is really the story of Moshe's birth. Now, the real question that I want to ask about this whole 10 psukim story of Moshe's birth is, how does this story help us understand Moshe? Well, one answer might be, it's not about Moshe. It's not about Moshe, it's about his mother, it's about his sister. It could be that really we're featuring other figures here, and that it's not really Moshe's story, because really what do I need to know about a passive baby, or what can I possibly know about an infant that has bearing on his adulthood? Okay, I'm going to argue otherwise. I'm going to say, no, it's clear that the story is about Moshe. Ha-Yeled. The story revolves around Ha-Yeled. And what is it that we know about Moshe as a result of this very long, developed birth story? So the first thing that I want to say basically two things. The first thing that I want to say about Moshe in his birth story is that he's born twice, right? He has two mothers, two wombs, right? Two ethnicities, right? He has his biological mother, who has a biological womb, right? And of course, she determines to save him. Why? Right? Vatera oto, she sees him, right? And so she decides to save him. The second mother, right? He has a second womb. That's the teva. It's a non-biological womb. He's taken out of the teva by his adoptive mother, who again, vatir'ehu et hayeled, right? She sees the boy and determines to save him, right? So the first thing that I think that we have to understand about Moshe is that Moshe has, sort of two identities. This is really the big question that we're going to see accompany Moshe into his adulthood, right? The big question that we're sort of left hanging with after his birth story is, okay, so who is Moshe? Is Moshe an Ivri, or is Moshe a Mitzri? It's not at all clear what's going to happen from his birth story, because the answer in his birth story is that he's clearly both, right? He's the product of two mothers who see him and have compassion on him. And by the way, it's not surprising at all to us that Moshe receives, who really gives him his name, right? That's not clear. Who gives him his name? In the pasuk, look at the pasuk. Look here in source number 1, in pasuk pasuk Yud. Vayigdal hayeled v'tivi'eu levat paro vayhi la levin v'tikra shmo Moshe. Who's the subject of vatikra? V'tivi'ehu levat paro. The subject there is clearly his mother. Vayhi la levin. The subject is the bat paro, but tikra shmo Moshe. Right? The Mefarshim are not clear here. Who calls his name Moshe? On the one hand, there's clearly an etymology that suggests, right, kimin hamayim mishitihu, that suggests that it's bat paro. On the other hand, it's a Hebrew etymology. Right? So some of the Mefarshim ask, does she speak Hebrew? But there's something else that I think is very complex here, which is, what kind of name is Moshe? It's an Egyptian name, right? Moses, Ra Moses, Tut Moses, Ach Moses, right? These are names of pharaohs, right? And the word Moses means to be born, right? The Netziv already notes on that pasuk that the word Moshe the name Moshe is an Egyptian name. What's fascinating about the name is that the name, at least in the paros, is always linked to an Egyptian deity, right? Ra, the sun god, birthed him, right? Ach, the moon god, birthed him, right? Whereas Moshe is just born, right? Moshe, born. And he has a Hebrew etymology for his name. So what is he? Is he Egyptian or is he Hebrew? The answer is that he is a complex amalgamation of two ethnicities. That's the backdrop of Moshe's story. We're going to get back to that point, but the second point that I want to make also, I think, is really a critical point for understanding Moshe, for understanding Moshe's greatness, for understanding his leadership, and that is that Moshe is saved, right? He's saved from certain death in a society which is immoral. Right? We said this before. Swirling around him is all of this evil, is all of this injustice, and along come these people to save him. But what's fascinating is who saves him, right? I mean, his mother saves him. That doesn't surprise us, right? Mothers do that, right? His sister saves him. A little less, a little less obvious or intuitive, but also doesn't surprise us. What obviously surprises us? But Paro, I mean, she's the big surprise in this story. And if you look here at this chiastic structure that I brought you here in on the first page, you see that the story is built around Bat Paro, right? So that we start the story with the birth of the son. As the child emerges from the womb, his life is in increasing danger, right? We go on to the mother's actions, on to the sister's actions, and the turning point of the story is when Bat Paro finds him. And there are no names in this story, right? Egypt is a society without names. Egypt is a society which has emptied other people of their identity. Everybody's a cog in the great mechanism of enslavement to Paro, right? Nobody has a name. But here, everybody in this story is, or 2 out of 3 of the figures in the story are described relative to the child, the mother of the child, the sister of the child. Bat Paro also doesn't have a name. But who is she described relative to? To the evil king, the tyrant king, right? She is the daughter of the one who made the decree. There's absolutely nothing here that would indicate to us that she would save Moshe. And of course, the Tanakh has a certain kind of way of telling stories, which is always, I think, very much relevant when we're doing a close reading of Tanakh. I think that all of us know that the Tanakh knows how to skip over 80 years in half of a pasuk, right? It also knows how to slow down and tell, 30 seconds in 2 psukim. That's what we have here. Look inside at this, in Shemot Perek Bet, pasuk hey, okay? Vatered bat Paro lirchotz al hayeor v'naroteha holchot al yad hayeor, right? The Midrash makes a big deal about this. She goes down, right, to bathe in the Yor, and she has her maidservants there, right? So these maidservants, what's their function here? Here's one. What's the function of the maidservants? They're there to tattletale on her, right? Whatever she does here is very public, right? V'narotel chot al yad hayor v'tera et hateva b'toch hasuf v'tishlach et amata v'tikacheha, right? It's very slow. This whole pasuk, I don't know what's about to happen to this child, right? Now, actually, that's not true. I think I know exactly what's going to happen to this child, right? The Bat Paro sees the teva, and she stretches out, or she sends her maidservant, and she brings it. Vatiftach, vatirehu et hayeled, v'hinei nar boche. Until this moment, right, we are certain that this child is doomed to death until the following words. Vatachmol alav. Vatomer miyaldei ha'ivrim zeh. Right? She has compassion on him, and she immediately acknowledges, I know who he is, I'm going to save him, despite the fact I know who he is. The Midrash gives her a lot of credit for this, and I think we should as well. Right? She's really defying her father. But for what? For what? This is the story of compassion. It's the story of the ability to see a person. Vatir'ehu et hayeled. She sees a human being in front of her. She sees not an object who has, no identity, but she sees a human being. This is really quite unusual in Egypt, right? In Egypt, people don't see the other. They're not moved by compassion for the other. And this is a great turning point in the story. It really focuses on Vatachmol aleha. That's the turning point, right? She has compassion on him. This, of course, is the continuation of the story of the Miyaldot. Are the Miyaldot Hebrews or are they Egyptians? Right? Ha-Miyaldot ha-Ivriot. What are they? Right? They're either Egyptian Miyaldot, who birthed the Hebrews, or they're Hebrew Miyaldot, like Rashi says, right? There's a big machloket among the Parshanim as to whether or not they're Egyptian or whether or not they are Hebrew. And the answer is why then do they save all those children? Because they're Miyaldot, right? They rise above ethnicity. It's not because they have loyalty to the Hebrews or, because they have a certain kind of allegiance to these children who are being born, but rather it's because they're Miyaldot. What is common with all these people that are defying the Paro and endangering themselves to defying the Paro, right? What is common to all of them? They're all women, right? And this is Chazal talk about this a lot. Bizchut nashim tzidkaniot nigalu Yisrael mimitzrayim, right? The idea here, and don't forget that that's not just that they're women, right? These are people who are motivated by yilod, by birth, right? Miyaldot. These are the ones who bring children into the world. The women who are surrounding Hayeled, the boy. These are people who are thinking about the importance of bringing children into the world. I'm going to say something else here. I'm not suggesting, and I don't intend to suggest that women are more compassionate than men. That's not. I don't think that's the message of the story. But I do think that one of the messages of the story is that rachamim is etymologically related to the word rechem, right? Compassion is related to childbirth. In other words, the foundation of compassion in the world is the fact that human beings bring the next generation into the world. That doesn't make everybody with a rechem someone with rachamim, and it doesn't mean that everybody who doesn't have a rechem does not have rachamim, but it does link together the miyaldot, the ones who are engaged in bringing life into the world, with those who are determined to save that life. And the ones who have the determination, the fortitude, and the belief system that enables them to defy the immorality that swirls around them. So this is definitely the backdrop of Moshe, right? The fact that all of these people, all these women are working hard in order to save him. And I think that Moshe recognizes this himself, right? Where do we see it? That Moshe recognizes how much this impacts on his persona. Well, first of all, the fact that he is seen by others, I think, enables him to see others, right? As soon as he emerges from the palace, what are the first words that happen? Vahi bayamim ha'im vayda Moshe vayar ish mitzri maket ish ivri me'achav vayar bisivlotam, right? He sees, Rashi says vayar bid, right? He sees into their sufferings, right? He sees deeply, he identifies with their suffering. It doesn't take, I think, great psychological insight to understand that the one who is seen by others, right, vatere oto, vatir'ehu et hayeled, acquires the ability to see the needs of others. It's not just that. Later on, we actually see Moshe, it's actually oddly in a negative context. I think I brought it for you here on page 2. In source number 4, we see actually Moshe understanding how deeply these qualities of motherhood are meant to be incorporated into his passion for the people, into his leadership. When he sort of throws up his hands in despair in Bimidbar, Parak Yud Aleph, what is it that he says to Hashem? Ha'anochi hariti et ha'am hazeh? Im anochi yiladtiu, or is it ha'ani? Where are we? Pasuk Yud. Ha'anochi hariti et kol ha'am hazeh? Im anochi yiladtiu. Did I conceive this people? Did I birth them? Ki tomar elai sa'eu v'chekech kasher yitza omen et hayonek al adama asher nishbat al avatam. You're telling me that I have to bear this nation in my bosom, like a nursing mother does her child, right? What's Moshe acknowledging here? It's sort of in a negative context, right? Because he's saying, I'm not that. But what is he recognizing? To be the ideal kind of leader, I have to have those maternal qualities, right? That seems to be very much what Moshe is saying. I think we have a sense that these experiences of Moshe as an infant, they shape his leadership, right? He is the kind of leader that he is because others were compassionate on him, that others went out of their way to save him. And these experiences ultimately create Moshe's ability to be a great leader. Moshe's the one who births the people. He's the midwife of the people, right? He crosses the Yam Suf with them. They emerge from the other side, and they are a reborn people. The one last point that I'm going to make here, and then we'll move on to the next section of the parak. The one last point that I'm going to make here is that his name is very odd, really, right? Because V'tikra shmo Moshe, v'tomer ki min hamayim shitihu, right? She calls it Moshe because she drew him from the water. But if really his name is because he was drawn from the water, what should his name be, as the Ibn Ezra notes? Mashui, right? Moshe is an active word, right? Mashui, it would reflect the accurate story, right? He is the Mashui, he's not the Moshe, right? So actually it's Yeshayahu that explains this to us. Look at what Yeshayahu says in source number 5, in Yeshayahu Perek Samech Gimel. He alludes a lot. Yeshayahu alludes to earlier stories, particularly to Sefer Shemot. Vayizkor Yemei Olam. He remembered days of old. Moshe Amo. Ayeh Hama'alem Miyam. Where is the one who took them out of the sea? He's referring to Moshe, and he's describing Moshe as the Moshe Amo, the one who pulls his nation, right? The one who is drawn not in order to give him the identity of the one who is passively pulled out of the water, but he is drawn so that he can be the drawer, right? He is called Moshe in order to reflect that. The goal of birthing Moshe within this context is not that he should live his whole life passively knowing that he was saved by others, but that he should use that knowledge in order to actively save others himself. He goes from the Mashui to the Moshe. Okay, so that's really the backdrop of Moshe's life, and all of this really leads us to the next section, the section where Moshe is. What did we say before? What's the key word of this second section? He's the Ish, right? It's not really true, right? Who's the Ish in this section? Right? It's not Moshe. It's mostly not Moshe. It's the Ish Mitzri, it's the Ish Ivri, it's the Ein Ish, right? Moshe as Ish has not quite happened yet, right? I would say it a little bit differently. In the first section of the parak is describing Moshe Hayeled. The second section of the parak is describing Moshe searching for an Ish. He's not an Ish yet. He's what we call a burgeoning adult, right? He's coming into adulthood. And in order to properly come into adulthood, he goes out in search of an Ish. That's why he comes out of the palace, okay? Well, what happens to Moshe when he comes out of the palace? Vayi bayamim hahem vayigdal Moshe, right? At the beginning of the second section here, Vayigdal Moshe, Vayetzei el echav, Vayar b'sivlotav, Vayar ish mitzri, Makeh ish ivri me'echav. What happens when he comes out of the palace? Well, the first question that I think we ask when Moshe comes out of the palace is, okay, so who is Moshe, right? We talked about this sort of complex ethnic background of Moshe. He has two mothers, right? Both of them seem quite determined to save him. And the question really that kind of lingers with us is, we don't know the last time he saw his mother, right? I mean, she nurses him, and then she weans him, and then she gives him over to the palace. Does she have an ongoing relationship with him? Does he ever see her again? What was the last age that he ever had any sort of contact with any Hebrew? Right? So he emerges from the palace having pretty much grown. We don't even know how old Moshe is at this point. Anybody want to venture a guess?
25.
Okay, could be 25. The Ramban is going to suggest less than 20. Right? Because that way?
There are people that say he was around age 25.
Yeah, could be. Yeah, so the Midrash is going to go more with an adolescent age. We really don't know, right? What we know is that he's a burgeoning adult, right? Today that would sort of take us to the 30s, right? But I imagine in those days it was a little bit younger. In any case, he emerges from the palace. We don't really know how he identifies himself. We kind of are going to assume, or at least I would assume, that he's going to identify himself as Egyptian. I mean, let's say the last 15 years he's been in the palace, right? It makes more sense logically, which is why what's wonderful about Pasuk Yud Aleph is Vayetze el Echav, Vayar b'sivlotam, Vayar ish mitzri makeh ish ivri me'echav, right? Twice we have the word Echav in this Pasuk. And here, I think, lots and lots of the Mefarshim and the Midrashim are very, very impressed with Moshe, very pleased with Moshe, right? Look at this. Moshe grew up in the palace. He emerges from the palace, a burgeoning adult, and he identifies with his Hebrew brethren, right? It seems really, really quite impressive. There's only one problem here. I mean, it's more than one problem. It's not clear from the story itself. You know, later in the story, Moshe arrives in Midian. They call him an Ish Mitzri, right? He doesn't seem to look Hebrew. He doesn't seem to have tried to define himself as Hebrew. Then he ends up with Reuel, right, with this Kohen Midian. There's something about this reading which is, leaves you vaguely with a sense that, does Moshe really identify with you? Maybe he does. Maybe in Pasuk Yud Aleph he does. The Ibn Ezra says no. The Ibn Ezra, I think, offers here a brilliant, sensitive reading of Pasuk Yud Aleph. It's also bold, right? It's a very bold reading from a parshanut perspective, from an exegetical perspective. Because look at what he does. Look here in source number 6. Look at what the Ibn Ezra does on this Pasuk. I love this Ibn Ezra. A lot of the commentaries on the Ibn Ezra don't love this Ibn Ezra, right? But I love this Ibn Ezra. I think it's really a great reading. Look at what he says. Vayetze el Echav המצרים, כי בארמון המלך היה. ותם מאחיו אחר, יזכר עברי ממשפחתו, כמו אנשים אחים. Right? Now, what is he doing here? He's saying, well, yeah, the same word, echav, which appears twice in the same pasuk, it refers to two totally different things. Okay, now, it's a good reading. You just have to do one thing. You have to understand the word sivlotam, not as passive, but as active, right? But how does the Ibn Ezra understand the pasuk? Vayhi bayamim ahem, vayigdal Moshe grows up. Vayitze el Echav, he goes out to be with his Egyptian brethren. Right? You've seen Prince of Egypt, right? Moshe and Ramses, with their horses riding down the streets. Right? He goes out to be with his Egyptian brethren, and then vayar b'sivlotam, he sees what they're doing. He sees the sufferings that they're imposing on others. By the way, grammatically, no problem. Right? Not only that, but in general, Sivlot Mitzrayim, in later on in Sefer Shemot, is going to talk about the active torments that Mitzrayim imposes on others. And what's wonderful about this reading, what's wonderful about this explanation of the Pasuk, it's not just the boldness of taking the same word in the same pasuk and understanding it in two different ways. I mean, I love that. I think that's very, that's somewhat audacious, right, to do that. But what's really wonderful about this is the way that he shows Moshe struggling to find his identity. And mid-pasuk, Moshe changes his mind. He goes out to be with his Egyptian brothers, Vayar b'sivlotam, he sees what they're doing, and he says, oh, no, I'm not with them. Vayar ish mitzri makeh ish ivri me'achav, I'm with them. What does that tell us about Moshe? And here I think that this is the key point. I'll get to your question in just a second. This is the key point with regard to Moshe. Who is Moshe? Is he Mitzri or is he Ivri? The answer is no. No, he's a person of justice. He's going to identify with the one who is the Ish. The Ish, right? When I say the Ish, I mean person of character, person of integrity, right? When David says to Shlomo, "V'chazakta v'ayita le'ish," right? Like we say today, be a man, a person who Moshe wants to identify with. That's what he's looking for, and immediately he leaves behind the Egyptians as a possible candidate for his Ish. Yeah.
Talking about identity, I think it's very clear if you look at Pasuk Yud. Yeah, Vayigdal Yael, then you go to Pasuk Yud Aleph, Vayigdal Moshe.
Yeah.
The word Vayigdal.
Yeah.
But she's bringing him back to Paro when he's already Yael. He has an identity.
Who's bringing him to Pharaoh? Oh, you're saying the mother is bringing him to Paro.
He's already not
Yeah.
an infant. He have an identity. He's a Yeled.
Well, I mean, the Yeled is the way he's referred to the entire time in this section. He's always Hayeled.
But
Until he gets a name, he doesn't have a sense of self. And we don't know who gives him that name, but it seems to be both
So look at the word
mothers.
Vayigdal. He's not a baby anymore.
Well, he doesn't have a name yet, right? He's still Hayeled, and he doesn't have a name yet. It's only in Pasuk Yud Aleph that we see him actually coming into his own. That's the beginning of the second section, right? Vayigdal Hayeled is sort of contrasted to Vayigdal Moshe, right? And they appear juxtaposed, but only once he has this name does he actually have this identity. What we see afterwards with Moshe is that Moshe continues in his quest for an ish. Okay, now, of course, we know Vayifen Kovacho Vayar Ki Ein Ish, right? That's what happens to Moshe, right? That's the next pasuk. Vayifen Kovacho Vayar Ki Ein Ish. Now, there's obviously different ways to understand this description. One way to understand the description is he's looking around, making sure that nobody's there so he can bury that Egyptian in the sand, right? But another way to understand it is he's looking for help, right? Vayifen Kovacho, what? Yeah, the Netziv says that. The Netziv says he's looking around. Is there any Egyptian around who's going to help me out here? No? Right? He's looking. There's no man in Egypt. The Ketav Kabbalah says something else. It says he's looking for a Hebrew. He's looking for somebody who still has a sense of self that will come to help him to defend the Hebrews against the Egyptians. Well, regardless of how we understand it, there is no Ish in Egypt. You know what happens the next day, of course, right? He goes out, he sees the two Ivrim that are fighting, and he says to the Rasha, Lama takeh re'echa. Why are you hitting your friend? And how do they respond to him? Mi samcha le'ish sar v'shofet aleinu. Right? Who made you the man? Right? We don't want a man here in Mitzrayim. We don't want a place of morality. We don't want a place of mishpat. We don't want a sar v'shofet aleinu. This anarchic, chaotic immorality, this is our reality, right?
Why are they okay with that? Why are the Jews okay with that? Because
Yeah,
they're separated?
it is a really hard question. Look, it's a really hard question, and it takes us really throughout the story because people get used to the environment that they're in, but even after they leave Egypt, they're still longing for Egypt. Right? All that's what they want, right? They want this life of, I do what I do, I get my food at the end of the day. Who needs all this, abstract morality? That's sort of what it looks like, right? They keep wanting to go back to Egypt. So, I mean, it's still a hard question, but clearly they are deeply mired in the world of Egypt. And Moshe, who had, I think, high hopes that they were going to, be the Ish, right? He turns to them to find his moral beacon. He doesn't, right? Vayifen kol v'chol vayar ki ein ish. Rashi, I think, really. Let me see if I brought you this Rashi. I think Rashi really picks up on this. Yeah, look in source number 10, right? Look in source number 10. Rashi says, when Moshe is very afraid, right? He becomes afraid. He runs away from Paro. So, Rashi does something which is nice. Rashi often does this. First he says, kimishpato or kipshuto, right? You have to read it like it is. But then he says, but there's a deeper meaning here that I feel compelled to bring you. Right? So look at what Rashi says. Vayira Moshe, kipshuto. Right? It means Moshe is afraid of Paro. But it doesn't seem so characteristic of Moshe, right? So then he goes on, he says, umidrasho, but what's the deeper meaning of Moshe's fear? Da'ago, he was worried. Al shera'a b'Yisrael r'shayim dilatorim. Amar me'ata, shema einam re'uyim l'higael. What was he really afraid of? He looked around and he saw this world of immorality, this world of corruption and injustice that had seeped into the essence of Am Yisrael. And he became very afraid. He said, they're not worthy of being redeemed. What am I doing here? And then look at the next part, Achei nodah hadavar, which means, kimashma'o. What does it really mean? It means, everybody knows I killed the Egyptian. I'm in big trouble. I have to leave. And then Rashi says, umidrasho. But what does it really mean? What does it mean on the deeper level? Nodali hadavar shayiti tameh. Now I understand the thing that I never understood. Mechatu Yisrael mikol shivim umot liot nirdim bavodat parech. Right? I always wondered, why were they enslaved? And now I get it. So according to the deeper meaning of Rashi, right, according to the Midrash here, why does Moshe run away from Egypt? Not because he's afraid he's going to be killed by Paro, but because he gives up, because he surrenders Am Yisrael to their fate, which he thinks is deserved, because he no longer sees them as worthy of redemption. That's what he's doing when he's looking around. Vayifen kol v'cho vayar ki ein ish. Right? And again, Yeshayahu can help us out here. If you look here in source number 9, the Yeshayahu is describing in Perek Nun Tet, this amazing Perek in Yeshayahu, he's describing a description of a society that is steeped in injustice. Look at what he says here. V'husag achor mishpat u'tzedaka merachok ta'amod ki chashla v'rachov emet u'nichocha lo tuchal lavo. Right? There's no mishpat. There's no mishpat, there's no tzedakah, there's no emet, there's no nichocha, v'tiyeh emet nehederet, right? The emet is gone. V'sar meira mishtolel, v'yar Hashem, God sees this society. V'yira be'einav ein mishpat. Look at the next few words. V'yar ki.
The following students to the main office, please. Marcel Zafrani, Saul
I'll
Batesh,
pause to let those people who need to leave.
Zachary Gindi, Stephen Greenstein, and Abraham Jamal. Thank you.
We talked about the identity and things back there. So he goes, and the first time that he sees the people fighting, and he realized that they need a leader to save them out.
He goes in what?
The following students also to the main office, please. Jack Hamadani, Mark D. Smoha, and Jerry Natkin. Thank you.
They don't deserve to be saved. So if we're talking about identity, so he does see himself more as a Jewish than less as a Jew.
Well, he leaves. He leaves them behind, right? Vayar ki ein ish is a description here also in Yeshayahu of a society which is not deserving of, it's not able to continue. It's a place of no mishpat. When Moshe leaves, he leaves behind the Ish Mitzri, he leaves behind the Ish Ivri, he sees that this is a place of Ein Ish, he sees this is a place that doesn't want an Ish Sar v'Shofet, and he goes to Midian. Now, I'll say something else. You know, this whole first description of Moshe, the burgeoning adult, actually revolves around 3 very similar incidents. Okay, the Abarbanel points this out. Nechama Leibowitz actually points this out as well. The Achad Ha'am, right? The secular Zionist thinker writes a very short and very nice essay, which he calls Moshe. Right, where he talks about this as well. But it was, before him, the Abarbanel talks about it, and that is that the 3 incidents that define Moshe's burgeoning adulthood are all incidents that occur when Moshe comes into an incident which is not any of his business.
Eric Buganim to the main office, please.
In which he saves the oppressor from the oppressed, right? The first one, he saves the Ish Ivri from the Ish Mitzri. In the second one, he saves the Ish Ivri from the Ish Ivri. And in the third one, he saves Binot Reuel from the shepherds, right? And look at in each of these cases, he doesn't have to go in, right? But he can't see injustice. He can't stand by the side and watch injustice happen. But look at the other point that's made here, and this comes back to what you were saying before. In each incident, it's different ethnicities that are involved. In one, he's saving a Hebrew from a non-Hebrew. In another, he's saving a Hebrew from a Hebrew. And in the third, he's saving a non-Hebrew from a non-Hebrew. Moshe's not interested in ethnicity, right? He's an equal opportunity, he's in an equal opportunity quest for justice. That's what he's looking for. He's looking for justice. He's not looking to save Am Yisrael. And when he sees that there's no justice in Am Yisrael, he throws up his hands in despair and he leaves. So what happens to Moshe, right? It's very hard to get Moshe to go back to Mitzrayim and save the people, right? How many times does he refuse at the Sneh? 5, right? Hashem keeps telling him over and over and over. He says, no, shlach nabiyad tishlach, lo ish devarim anochi, right? It's very hard to get him to go back. He left it behind. But what happens to him in Midian, I think, is really the critical point. Let's look back on
Jerry Natkin and Mark Smuha. Please, Mark D. Smuha, Jerry Mackin and Mark D. Smuha, we need you in the main office. Jerry Mackin.
Okay.
Again, Jerry Mackin, Mark D. Smuha, we need you in the main office.
Okay. What happens when Moshe gets to the well? I think Moshe is filled with despair, right? Because we sense it a little bit when he names his child, right? Gershom, Kiger Hayiti Be'eretz Nochria. He calls his child Gershom, right? I was a stranger there. And one of the questions is where's he talking about? What's the Eretz Nochria? Is it Midian? Is it Mitzrayim? Maybe it's the whole world, right? He feels other, right? He goes to the desert, right? That's not a small matter, right? To go to the desert means I'm looking for a place which doesn't have people. I'm looking for a place where there's no civilization, right? Moshe largely despairs from human beings. And when he gets to that well, look at what happens. Look here in Perek Bet, Pasuk Tet Zayin. Right? We have these 7 daughters of Reuel, v'tavona v'tidlena v'timalena hara'atim lashkot tzon avihen, v'yavo haro'im v'yigarashum, v'yakam Moshe v'yoshian v'yashket tzonam. Right? We know the story. These girls are drawing water. They're putting it in the troughs. They bring their sheep to the water, and along come the shepherds, push their sheep away, bring their own sheep to the troughs. What have they stolen from the girls? Their labor. Right? They've stolen the labor, and at this point, Moshe saves them, and they go home. Look in Pasuk Yudchet. Vatavona el Reuel avihem. They come back to Reuel, their father. Vayomer madua miharten bo hayom. Right? How'd you get home so quickly today? What does that indicate to us? It's a daily occurrence, right? Madua miharten bo hayom. How'd you get home so quickly? So they describe as follows: Vatomarna ish mitzri hitzilanu miyad haroim v'gam dalo dalalanu v'yashket hatzon. Right, this Egyptian man saved us. He drew water for us. It's kind of a classic well scene, right? The betrothal scene that we have, right? Look at Reuel's response. This is what I want you to see. Vayomer el benotav ve'ayo. Where is he? Lama zazavten et ha'ish kir'en lo v'yochal lachim. Right? Where is he? How could you have left him? Do you hear a little rebuke here? How could you have left him there? What's the matter with you? Go get him and bring him home. That's not the way we repay the kindness of a stranger. Now here for a minute I want to focus in on Reuel. Right? He's a pretty mysterious figure. I mean, who is he? Is he Yitro? Is he Yeter? Is he Chovav? Are they all the same person? This family of Moshe, his Mechutanim, right, are going to be very important throughout the Torah and even later in the Tanakh. They're going to keep popping up, right? They make lots of appearances later in Tanakh. One thing seems to be the case, and that is that they don't convert, right? And despite the fact that in the Midrash, Yitro becomes a Ger Tzedek, when Moshe turns to Yitro in the Midbar Parak Yud and says, come with us, Vayita lanu le'enayim, ve'hitavnu lach, we'll do good for you. What does he say? Lo, ki el artzi ve'el moladti elech. I'm going back to Artzi Umladti. It's the opposite movement of Avram, right? Right? He goes back. So who is this Reuel? Who is this family of Abraham? So I want to say a couple things about Reuel. First of all, Reuel seems very intent on doing the right thing, right? Go bring him home. Let's give him a meal, okay? It's not just that. What does he call Moshe?
Ish.
Ha-ish. Ha-ish, we haven't yet had it with the Hey HaYediyah, right? Ha-yeled, 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 this is clearly the boy. We haven't yet found the ish, right? We had ish mitzri, ish ivri, misam chalish, right? But suddenly, we found the man. Who found the man? Reuel found his man, right? Which indicates to us something which I think we sense, and that is that Reuel himself seems a bit disconnected. Right? He's the Kohen Midian. Why are they bothering his daughters? Right? That's an obvious question. Why are they bothering his daughters every day? Why is there no justice in Midian? Why is there no justice for the Kohen of Midian? These are really burning questions. And the Midrash, some of the Midrashim go in all sorts of directions with regard to Reuel and Yitro and all the questions about him. But one of the Midrashim says, well, it's obvious that Reuel is is a person that nobody likes in town. Why? Well, they give this whole story. He used to be a Kohen of Avodah Zarah, right? But then he saw that there was no truth in it, and he was searching for truth, and eventually he took all the Avodah Zarah out of his house, and he threw it on the sidewalk, and the people started to torment him, okay? Whatever it is, we don't really know, right? But Reuel is alien in the town, right? People aren't treating him nicely. And there's a wonderful midrash. I mean, it's a midrash that appears all over the place. I brought it for you here in source number 12, but you're probably familiar with the midrash. It appears in Gemara and Soda. It appears also in the Targum. It appears in several midrashim, right? The midrash says, when Paro was deciding what to do with those pesky Jews, right, who were just, proliferating at an alarming rate, right? So when he was deciding what to do, he called his 3 trusted advisors, right? So there was Bil'am, who, rallied, Aru, Ada Yesod Ba, right? Kill them, or enslave them. And that's why Bilam has to be killed. Eov didn't say a word. That's why Eov suffers, right? And Yitro, what did Yitro do? He ran away from Egypt. He ran from injustice. In this midrash, who is Yitro? Yitro is Moshe, right? He runs from injustice. He can't bear to be part of a society which is perpetuating this kind of injustice. In other words, and I think that this is the point that maybe that midrash is picking up on, Reuel / Yitro, I'm going to just conflate between them for our purposes. Reuel is in search of an Ish, just as Moshe is in search of an Ish. Actually, the one who first finds his Ish in this parak is Reuel. Lama ze azavten et ha'ish. Why'd you leave behind the Ish? What is it that really motivates Reuel in the story? I think what really motivates Reuel is a word that later on is going to motivate Yitro. We just read it in last week's Parsha. What word motivates Yitro at the beginning of Parshat Yitro? Actually, the word lahatzil, right? Ish mitzri hitzilanu. Baruch Hashem asher hitzil etchem. Vayatzilem Hashem. In Perek Yechet, the word lahatzil appears there 5 times, right? What Yitro is looking for, what Reuel is looking for, is the person who is willing to intervene, lehatzil, right? And he finds it. That's what Moshe is looking for, right? They are looking for each other, Moshe and Yitro. And of course, if you look at the next pasuk, if you look in pasuk of Aleph, Vayoel Moshe lashevet et ha'ish.
Why Moshe called him Aish?
Ha'ish, because he's the Ish. He's the one. He's the one who has taken him home, who has seen fit to treat him properly, who is feeding him. He sees in Reuel that which he is looking for, that which he couldn't find, not among the Ish Ivri and not among the Ish Mitzri. Vayoel Moshe lashevet et ha'ish. This isn't the end of the story, of course, right? The end of the story, I think, well, the story continues throughout the Tanakh, but the magnificent end to the story is in Parshat Yitro, which we're going to get to in just a moment. But before we get there, I want to say one more thing about this great partnership that happens here, right? I'm going to say 2 things about it. One is that there's a great midrash. I brought it for you here in the Abarbanel, because the Abarbanel brings the midrash, he formulates it very nicely. Look in source number 13. Amru ba-midrash, shemate ha'elokim, hayam natua bipardesh shel Yitro. Right, there was this, that great staff of that great Mata Elokim that Moshe walks around, doing the makot with, right? Well, he found that, buried or implanted in the orchard of Yitro. Right? You know what it is. You know what his story is.
It's Arthur.
It's Arthur, right? It's Excalibur. It's the sword, the stone, right? Nobody can pluck out that Mate Elokim until Moshe comes along and he sort of easily plucks it out. Right? The great prize is the marriage to the girl, right? First of all, I'm gonna sort of rephrase that in a moment, the great prize of the story. But before we get there, I think that the Abarbanel explains it the way the Abarbanel explains it. But I think the way that we've sort of built up this year makes this midrash very easily understandable. What is the midrash saying? The midrash is saying that Yitro has something in his garden which he can't release upon the world, right? It's stuck there because it's only there with Yitro. But it's ultimately the partnership between Yitro and Moshe that enables them to release this morality, this search for justice upon the world. What of course happens in Parshat Yitro is that Moshe is the lawbringer. He's the one who brings Chukei Elokim V'Torotav, but Yitro builds the judicial infrastructure. Without Yitro's contribution, Moshe would have collapsed, and the whole enterprise wouldn't have worked. It's the two of them. Each one brings something of his own to this formula. The other point that I wanted to make here before we get to Parshat Yitro, which I think is really the important point, the other point that I wanted to make here is that in this sort of, betrothal scene, right? Because all betrothal scenes happen next to a well, right? So the man leaves his home, he journeys to a distant land, he finds a girl next to a well, he's invited to a meal, they're from the same family, right? Those are sort of the features of the betrothal scene. In this betrothal scene, what's particularly striking is that Moshe actually doesn't meet a girl by the well. He doesn't meet a girl by the well. Who does he meet? 7 girls, all daughters of Reuel. See, Moshe, and I think that this is really a critical point for understanding the legacy that Moshe leaves behind in the world. Moshe's legacy is not vertical. It's not his children, right? His relationship with Tzipporah is not the goal of his marriage, oddly enough, right? And his relationship with Tzipporah has nothing to speak about later in the story. And his children don't continue his legacy. Ultimately, Moshe's legacy is his ability to release justice in the world. And at the betrothal scene, the most important relationship that he forges is not with those unnamed 7 girls, but with his father-in-law, who eventually partners with him to leave behind his lasting legacy on the world, which is not vertical, but horizontal, right? It's his ability to give Chukei Elokim V'Torotav. It's his ability to spread justice. And that's what Reuel or Yitro helps him to accomplish, okay? Now, this point really takes me to Shemot Perek Yud Chet. Shemot Perek Yud Chet really is the climax of the partnership between Moshe and Yitro. And what happens here in this parak is the correction of, the problems that he saw in Am Yisrael. Because what Moshe is about to do is, we're about to basically cause Egypt to collapse, right? That's the end of Egypt. And now we have to rebirth the world, right? It's clear that the beginning of Sefer Shemot is, uncreation for the purpose of recreation, right? The Eser Makot are the uncreation. We have lots of Bereishit Perek Aleph words. And then we recreate, Vayar Hashem Ki Tov, right? We see Moshe, he's good. Uvnei Yisrael Paru Vayishrutu Vayirbu Vayatzmu B'Me'od Me'od. We have the repopulation of the world. And now we have to create a foundation of tzedek u'mishpat, a foundation of morality, a world in which if a child is born, we know that child will live. We know that child can find an ish, right? That's what we're trying to do. And the foundation of this happens in Shemot Perek Yud Chet. When Yitro comes to Moshe, look in Pasuk Hey. Oh, I didn't bring it for you on the source sheet. Sorry, so I'll just read it for you. In Perek Yud Chet, Pasuk Hey, Vayavo Yitro choten Moshe uvanav v'ishto el Moshe el hamidbar. I'm going to skip ahead a little bit to Pasuk Zayin. Vayish'alu ish l're'ehu l'shalom. Right? Lama takeh re'echa mi samcha le'ish. Right? It's the mistreatment of the re'ah, of the friend, that causes Moshe to run away from the people in despair. And what happens between Moshe and Reuel, or Moshe and Yitro, reestablishes the foundations of the way in which people are meant to interact. Vayishalu ish l're'ehu l'shalom, so that later on in the same parak, when Moshe is speaking to his father-in-law, he says, when people come to me, v'shafati ben ish uven re'ehu. Right? It's the reestablishment of the ish and the re'ehu, which were the two things that were problematic between the people in Shemot Perek Bet. That was certainly something that was very problematic. The other thing that was problematic between Am Yisrael, right, the Ivrim, was when they said, Mi samcha le'ish sar v'shofet aleinu, right? Who made you a man who is a sar and shofet, who is the ruler and the judge over us? But what happens in this parak? What happens in this parak is that we create a system of sarei alafim, sarei meot, sarei chamishim, sarei asarot, v'shaftu et ha'am. It's the reestablishment of the ish sar v'shofet aleinu. We even have the word samcha, right? Mi samcha leish sar v'shofet aleinu. So here in pasuk kaf aleph it says v'ata techezeh mikol ha'am anshei chayil, right? That's the search for the ish yirei Elokim anshei emet, right? Remember that description that we had in Yeshayahu of vati ha'emet ne'ederet? It was a society that had no emet. Well, here we have the building of a society where we have anashim again, anshei chayil, anshei emet, v'samta aleihem, sarei alafim, sarei me'ot, sarei chamishim, v'sarei asarot, v'shaftu et ha'am. It's all those words that hark back to Shemot Perek Bet, when Moshe despaired over the future of the people. Mi samcha leish sar v'shofet aleinu. The answer is Yitro and Moshe, right? The combination, the partnership between Yitro and Moshe, it enables the establishment of a society in which samnu sar v'shofet anshei chayil, anshei emet, sarim v'shoftim aleinu. That's the ultimate goal, and this is really, I think it's a beautiful partnership that happens between Moshe and Yitro. I'm certainly not certain that Yitro converts, right? That he becomes a Ger Tzedek. As I said before, he seems to leave behind the people. I actually like that reading even better, right? Because what?
Why does that make sense?
Okay, I'll maybe I'll conclude with this idea, which is that, you know, the story of Yitro here at the beginning of last week's parsha in Perek Yochet seems to be out of order chronologically, right? It seems to be out of order chronologically according to, you know, many of the Mefarshim and the Midrashim, right? It seems to sort of be like, you know, artificially taken out of its place and put before Har Sinai. Right? I mean, you know the famous machloket between the Ramban and Ibn Ezra, right? But I think the Ibn Ezra's right? Because it wouldn't make a lot of sense. First of all, it says Yitro came to Har Elokim, and they don't get to Har Elokim until the next parak, right? So this parak really does seem to be out of order, which only lends itself to the question, why take this parak and put it out of order, right? And that's really, I think, the critical question here. Why would we take it out of order? So the Ibn Ezra answers. Anybody remember what the Ibn Ezra said?
Amalek.
Yeah, right. He says they do it to juxtapose it to Amalek, right? Which we miss every year. I mean, at least in the reading of the parsha, because we finish, right, the previous parsha, we finished Parshat Ben Shalach with Amalek, and we wait a whole week before we read about Yitro. But what I think is really an amazing linguistic accomplishment is when you look at the juxtaposition between Amalek and Yitro, and you see that the two parshiot are echoing each other, right? Which, by the way, I think ultimately means that the Ibn Ezra is right. There's an attempt to juxtapose Amalek and Yitro, even if it means artificially taking Yitro out of its proper chronological place. And when I say they echo each other, I mean almost every word, right? I mean, you know, the Yitro, the Amalek story is a very brief story. Vayavo Amalek vayilachem. That is a contrast to Vayavo Yitro vayishalu ish l're'ehu l'shalom. Bichar lanu anashim. Moshe says to Yoshua, right? For what? For war. And in the next parak, what do we have? Vayivchar Moshe anshei chayil. For what? For judgment, right? Vayetzei yilachem Amalek machar. Tomorrow you will go fight with Amalek. What do we have in Yitro? Vayimi machorat, right? We have in the story of Amalek, Vayeshev Moshe, right, for the purpose of war, or for, you know, that the people should win the war. And in the next, Vayeshev Moshe, for purposes of judgment. And the story of Amalek, Videi Moshe Kvedim, right? In the story of Yitro, Kaved Mimcha Hadavar, right? You see it? I mean, the whole story echoes each other. What's the point here of juxtaposing these two stories next to each other? I think we have the model of perpetual enmity with an outsider who is hostile to what it is that Am Yisrael is trying to accomplish. And then we have the model of perpetual friendship with an outsider who is amenable, not just amenable, who is deeply, deeply supportive of what Am Yisrael is trying to accomplish. And this kind of juxtaposition, I think, creates, a story that continues throughout the rest of Tanakh. Right? Think of Shaul. When Shaul goes to fight Amalek in Shmuel Aleph Perek Tedvav, right? He's standing on the cusp of the opening of that war. And he stops right midstream, turns to Amalek and turns to the Bnei Keni and says to them, Suru Ridu Maher, go away. I don't Pena Osifcha Imahem, or I don't want to kill you. Imo, Pena Osifcha Imo. Right? You are distinct from Amalek. I'm always going to distinguish between Amalek, whatever it is that Amalek represents, with whom I engage in a perpetual enmity, but it's extremely important to also be able to identify the Reuels of this world, the Yitros of this world, because without Reuel, we would have had a hard time releasing Moshe's justice on the world. And this kind of partnership, I think, it really resonates, not just in the Tanakh, but today as well, right? What is the nature of the relationship of Am Yisrael with the outside world? The answer is Amalek and Yitro, Amalek and Reuel, right? They're juxtaposed to each other in order to give us these two models, which are really very different. So that's the story of Moshe's initial encounter. Maybe I'll just conclude with one final point, which is that when we meet Moshe in Perek Gimel, it's the first time that Moshe encounters God, right? There's this whole story of Moshe throughout the Torah, right? We ask ourselves, who is Moshe, right? So I could ask this question of kids, of high school students, and everybody might say something a little bit different. Like, what's Moshe's main quality, right? What would you say? Is he Ish Elokim? Is he Ish Mishpat V'Tzedek, right? Is he the person of justice? Is he the person of God? These two aspects of Moshe are complementary, and they're both very, very, I think, deeply embedded in Moshe. But when we get to the story of the Ma'amad Hasneh, at the beginning of the story in Perek Gimel Pasuk Aleph, we're told that Moshe goes out to the Midbar in order to shepherd the sheep of his father-in-law, of Yitro, right? So the Mefarshim ask the question, why does he go to the Midbar? Right? That doesn't seem to be an obvious place to pasture the sheep, right? So, Rashi and Sforno each say something different, right? Rashi says, everybody knows what Rashi says. What does Rashi say? Gezel, litrachek min hagezel. He wants to make sure that he doesn't shepherd his sheep on, God forbid, on anybody else's pasture. So he goes to a place where it's clearly no man's land, right? It's clearly a place that doesn't belong to anybody. The Sforno says something else. The Sforno picks up on, he goes to Har HaElokim Choreva. And the Sforno says, why does he go out to the Midbar? Lihit boded, ulihit palel, right? He's a Breslover, right? Correct to Sforno, right? He goes out to commune with God. He goes out to a place where he can find spiritual, the ability to commune with God all by himself. So I think maybe what's going on here, underlying this kind of machloket, is the question of, who is Moshe? What qualifies him to be called by God? Right? God appears to him at the sneh. It's an amazing moment, right? And the question the Mefarshim here are dealing with is the question of, why? Why Moshe? And the Sforno seems to indicate, well, Moshe's a person of great spiritual depth, right? And he's looking for it. He's seeking it, right? Those are the same midrashim that tell us, Vayar Hashem kisar lir. Oh, God saw that he turned aside to look at the burning bush. Not everybody looks for God, right? The fact that he saw the burning bush and he went looking for God, that's what qualified him. But there's another midrash that says, Vayar Hashem kisar lir ot, that isn't talking about that he turned aside to see the burning bush. It's saying God saw that he looked at the people in Mitzrayim. Vayar b'sivlotam, vayar ish Mitzri, makeh ish ivri me'echad. What God sees about Moshe is not his spiritual qualities, like the Sforno is saying, but his qualities of justice, like Rashi is saying. And the way that I've been reading, Perek Bet, I think the Perek Bet is very clear about this. Right? I think the Perek Bet is very clearly saying Moshe is Moshe because his background is mishpat, is tzedek, is justice. That's what makes Moshe Moshe. And I would even say something beyond this, which is that the foundation of Am Yisrael is tzedek and mishpat. The next step is spiritual fulfillment, right? The next step is being able to commune with God. Ultimately, if you ask me the question about Moshe, is Moshe Ish Tzedek or Ish Elokim? The answer is he's exceptionally both, right? Exceptionally both. He is the spiritual exemplar, and he's also, of course, the exemplar of justice. But if you ask me, who is Moshe? What's his foundation? I think it's very clear in Shemot Parak Bet that his foundation is a foundation of his inability to abide in justice, his constant, unending, unceasing quest for justice. Okay, so.